Riga is the Latvian village of Sigulda. It's known for its caves and its ravines, and also its bobsled, skeleton, and luge track, and that's where we are for run number 2 of the men's singles luge competition on the Everspecher Luge World Cup. Hi everyone, I'm Tim Singer. It's stop number 6 on this year's World Cup circuit as the temperature in the air and the track are hovering just below the 0 mark. A look at this track, it's 1,260 windy meters of length from top to bottom, with a drop of about 400 feet from the high spot to the lowest spot on this track. Already we've got the first run underway. In a moment I'll be joined by my broadcast partner Emily Sweeney, but let's recap the top 3 after the first heat. In third place, Arturs Durznieks from here in Latvia, looking for his first ever career World Cup podium. His best past finish, a 6th place. In second, it's the Olympic bronze medalist, Johannes Ludwig, who's having a solid season. He's also in second in the World Cup standings, trailing in both the World Cup and in today's race, his country mate, Felix Lock. As Felix, the 2-time Olympic champion, looks to make it 7 wins out of 8 races so far this season. Here's a look at the start list for run number 2 as they count them down from slowest to fastest. And to recap from run number 1, 2 of the Austrians, Reinhard Eger and David Gleicher, were disqualified for having overheated runners, so they will not take part. It'll be a 30 sled field here in run number 2. Right now I'm pleased to introduce my guest commentator from Team USA, World Championship medalist Emily Sweeney. And Emily, a lot of fun during run number 1, some tight, unpredictable action.
There was, yes, a lot of mistakes that we expect to see on a technical track like Sigulda, but it only leads to some exciting racing.
30th place after run number 1 from Romania. 4 paddles, and settling in is Teodor Tăria, 22 years old, from Breza. And World Cup luge and World Championship luge for that matter. 2 runs, total time competition. So the running clock on the lower right part of your screen is added on from the first heat time. You've got to put 2 together.
You do, and unfortunately these first few sleds did not have the first component to that, which is a solid first run. So there were a lot of huge mistakes in the first run. Very early on to 13 there. He does a nice job of evening out the height in curve 14 and a beautiful correction. But after the first run that Tăria had, this is just for himself with this run.
That's what I was going to say. When you have the rough first run, at least it's a slightly better to have the better second run. At least for the rest of the week, you feel okay. But that 4 names in 1. Now, when you mention, Emily, that you're early to a corner, what does that exactly mean in layman's terms?
Right, so with each, when you think about driving with any sliding sport, you have the natural physics of if you rolled a rolling ball down the track, there's the natural line that the ball would take. So that's what the sled would like to take. But if you go early, that just means that you're hitting the profile of the curve a little too soon before you would want to do. And if you're late, you're entering past the point you would want to. So all we're doing is trying to manipulate the natural lines that the sled would want to take for the smoothest and fastest line down the track.
Marian Skupek working on a nifty 10-second advantage over Tăria after run number 1. That's to say he has some time to play with is an understatement.
It is, but there's another big skid. So in order for these sleds to really be competitive with the rest of the field, they need to figure out how to blend those top curves. That's where you build all of your speed for this track. A very sharp peak and high on the end of 12. He kept it shiny side down, but
I love that term because I was still having problems there out of curve 14. Be hard pressed to make it to the finish now.
He'll make it, but this is a rough ride.
Still with the 9-second lead. Yeah, obviously, all of that, of course, we kid, but it was Korea's rough first run. That was the problem there. I love that term, shiny side down, because in many ways it was a quick recovery at speeds of 60 miles per hour at that point.
It was. That's kind of what we say as our last ditch, because right there it would have been very easy for him to simply roll over as like a wave that gets to its peak and then crashes over on itself. It's very easy for your body to do that just from gravity, but he really pinned his shoulders back and kept the steels, so we say the shiny side down, and that's the inner victory that you can walk away with.
If you have comments, questions, insights about this weekend's luge competition, by all means, we'd love for you to share your thoughts on Twitter at Luge Announcer. As we look at Finn, the Wiesmann sponsor, Wiesmann no longer the title sponsor, but still involved in the sport of FIL World Cup. You can also email us at luge.announcer@gmail.com, and this is actually the final weekend where we can be so casually conversational, because starting next week we will also be simulcasting on some USA networks. Now on course, Giorgi Sogiani from Georgia.
I'm still just really happy to see Giorgi racing in this World Cup. It's really great to see Georgia represented.
No question about it. And of course, luge fans, people who know the sport, are all too familiar with the tragedy of the 2010 Olympic Games. But for Georgia, and as you mentioned, for Nomar's family leading the way to keep this nation going, that's just such a great tribute.
Up until there, he had some pretty good lines. You're seeing that he's sitting up on the sled a little bit compared to the other sliders. I think if I were to guess, he came to the sport a little later in life, and that's so with more experience and more comfort, he'll start stretching out on the sled and putting his head back a little bit more. But up until 14 there, that was a pretty good run.
Here is that
this
exit
is
of
14.
Yeah.
Right, just a little bit long on the exit there. So what happened is he actually came off the curve too soon and then back up on the exit of the curve, and that profile is just pushes him with a little sideways direction.
Georgia, incidentally, is the 23rd different nation to take part in the World Cup this year. 22 nations on hand this weekend. All told, 130 athletes from 105 different sleds. And incidentally, Emily, of those 130 athletes, all of them tested negative before getting on the plane in Austria on Monday or Sunday or Monday morning, and then all of them tested negative again upon landing in Latvia. So that's just great. Here's Lucas Gufla, 21 years old, from Italy, 27th place after the first run. He's in 19th overall in the World Cup standings with 3 top 20 results so far this year. Probably still getting to know this track.
I would say so. He's definitely a young Italian here at the track today, and with that, being a part of a strong program is great. You have a lot of people to learn from within your team, but there's also that kind of extra pressure you have on yourself to get there quickly, to get to that higher level, and it takes time in this sport. So he's still in that learning and building period, but you see a lot of good things when you look at this slider on the track.
Well done.
Beautiful exit.
Straightaway to 15. Looping a bit there.
A little bit of a sharper peak than you would want. And a crazy Kreisel there. It's going to bleed time.
Big advantage nonetheless. A 49.081 is the fastest time here in the early going in run number 2. Italy taking over the lead. The number 1 you see on Lucas's bib means only that he was the first off in run number 1. Has nothing to do with World Cup standing.
Right, and he did come down in first place, but Lucas, along with his coaches, are not looking to compare him to the sliders he's around right now. So that's a bit of a disappointing performance in today's World Cup, but we'll see moving on to next week if he can bounce back and really start start to chip away at building experience on this World Cup circuit.
That mascot, by the way, that you just saw goes by the name of Rix, which is also the same first name of a Latvian luger we'll see a little later on. But here from Sweden is Svante Kohala, 22 years old from Luge. 12th place finisher at the Youth Olympic Games in Lillehammer in 2016.
Right, that was on his home track.
That's right.
And now we're on a little bit more of a technical track, but I've been really impressed with Svante so far this season. It's nice to see him in so many World Cups, and I just want to see him look a little bit more comfortable on the sled. You see his head is a little bit up. Nice line through 11, 12 there. He just needs to stretch back and kind of commit to it a little bit more. 0.02
of a second is his advantage. Now he's into the red. Still could find the green, especially with that nice exit.
Beautiful. He had a nice gentle cross from the left to the right side going into Kreisel there, and he did it. He pulled it off.
You know, this isn't his home track. Lillehammer is, as you mentioned, but this could have been his home track because I'm not sure if you knew this, Emily, but Sweden was bidding for the 2026 Olympic Games. Stockholm was making that bid. They lost out to Milan, Cortina. But had they won that bid, the sliding sports would have been held here in Latvia. Just sort of bittersweet. Sweden would have loved to have gotten it, but for the sliding sports athletes, it'd be a little nicer to be closer to the action, right?
Right. I'm happy that Milan Cortina won that bid because of that. I think it would have, I don't know if it would have felt like the Olympics for the sliding sports just being that far removed from the rest of the events.
Well,
but and I look forward to Milan Cortina. I think that's a great spot to have, kind of bringing it back to the roots of winter sport.
Valley Cretu now pulling off 5 paddles and settling for Romania. Now you've spent a lot of time in northern Italy. Have you been to Cortina?
I have not, so I'm excited to check out that area. Have you been there? It sounds like you have.
Many times, and it's just gorgeous. And the spot where that track is, providing they're rebuilding in the same location, is spectacular. It's always warm. It's always sunny.
It's a good place to be in northern Italy. So I think the entire circuit is looking forward to making our way there.
Very clean slide so far at 120.8 for Valentin Cretu. At 75 miles per hour even.
His height in curve 15 was pretty early, so he did a nice job of managing that on the exit, and he had a nice Kreisel to finish off the run. But
shaking
he does
his
not
head.
look very happy.
Yeah, well, that's what we were talking about during run number 1. His dream still is to win a race. Gotta love those ambitions.
Definitely. He looked very nice on the sled there. A great exit of 14. This was a better performance for Valentin this season. I haven't seen the performances at where they need to be to work towards that goal. So this run was a step towards that.
There's a great look at what we call social distancing, luge style. No one hovering next to anyone else. The most you'll see is an occasional fist bump at the end of a good run or at the end of the race, but they've done a great job of keeping things separated and keeping this sport going throughout the season. Ruslan's happy behind the mask, the Russian trainer. As now Pavel Repelov throws that shield down. 11th place, very respectable in his World Cup debut last week. Although, lest we forget, his brother Roman in his first ever World Cup race finished 5th back in 2016. But Pavel, he is the silver medalist last year at the Youth Olympics on a track where this year's World Cup is headed, San Moritz.
Right, and Pavel had a very large mistake in his first run, so there's so much time. I'm excited to see if he can have a clean run, really to see where he would shake out if he had performed better in his first run. A little early in that kind of labyrinth section, but he has a beautiful curve 11.
0.4 of a second up, a big skid there.
Yes, and he's over. And a loose sled. That's the #1 rule when you crash in luge is try and hold on to your sled. So I think that really surprised him.
Not only will you be disqualified if you lose contact with the sled then in effect becomes somewhat of an extra danger on the track, right?
It does. There's a lot of, it could be, depending on how you crash, the sled could be behind you and then it could come and hit you, which would cause a lot of injury. You could, as when you let go of it, has a higher chance of breaking, which is, this is precious equipment that we have. So there's a lot of bad things. But here we see in curve 11 is pretty, that was a great curve 11, but there's a lot of direction over. He flattened it out a little too much, had a lot of pressure into 12 and then early entrance onto 13 and then just flipped off the end. I've crashed just like that before in the past. It's a very easy crash to have on this track, but that doesn't make it any easier to swallow.
You're coached on so many aspects of the sport, Emily. Are you coached on how to crash?
You're not necessarily coached rather than hold on to your sled, do not let go of your sled, but you learn just over the time. I get asked a lot, do you crash? Does it hurt when you crash? And my response is always the same. Yes, you will crash, but that's how we learn in this sport. And we see it here. This is his, how many World Cups has Pavel competed in? Not very many.
Right.
Right, so he's still learning, and crashing is just like anything else. You have to fail to be better, and crashing is a part of learning in this sport.
Let's look at Peter Pence, one of the Austrian coaches. Looking a little forlorn. I'm not sure if he was the one responsible for overheating those runners on the Austrians a little earlier today, as Valentin Cretu gets a little extra time in the leaders area. And the Latvian coaching team is gathering together. They generally have a track hold after most crashes for no other reason than to make sure the course has not been scratched up in an unfair way and that there is no extra debris on the ice.
Right, especially when there's a loose sled. You have to make sure that nothing broke off as it was navigating the track alone.
That's Atis Stenga on the left, who is a longtime supporter of the sport of luge, both on the international and Latvian national level. And now we resume action with Chris Eisler, 27 years old, from Chemnitz, which is in the Saxony region of Germany. One-time World Cup winner. And if nothing else on this German team, you have to be patient. And he's been on the national team for 7 seasons, Emily, but maybe racing in only 1/3 of the events because there is so much depth on this team.
Right, but like you said, patience is key, and I think that we've seen a lot of sliders kind of break out into their own, and Chris had the second fastest start time in the first run, so that shows that he's really putting in the work and effort towards becoming better. He just has a lot of skidding in those top curves, which scrubs his speed for the rest of the track.
Still
better
happening.
this run, but he's still off.
Yeah, he's 5 seconds, not 5 seconds, a half second up, 0.5. Cleaning it up down here a bit.
Right, there's kind of 2 modes that you need to slide in sometimes. There's the large drives and the kind of muscling it through a lot of the pressures, and then there's the side of sliding that you really need to be able to absorb those small entrances and exits, and that's where a lot of the speed is found in our sport. And it's a lot of finesse that is challenging to, it's challenging to coach, challenging to interpret sometimes as a slider.
He picked up about 0.2 of a second at the top of the track on the Romanian who had the lead, but pretty much nothing more the rest of the way. Nonetheless, the lead right now for Chris Eisler of Germany, with a country mate of his, as the German flag flies in the center. Here's Moritz Elias Bowman. The differential between these 2 Germans after run number 1 was a mere 1/1000th of a second, which someone was telling me a few weeks back is basically the blink of an eye, or the blink of the eye is 6 thousandths or something like that.
Right, I've read it's 4 to 8 thousandths. That is the blink of an eye. So really slice that time up, and the difference between these athletes, which is crazy when you think of how many variables have gone into each run.
Moritz Bowman just turned 21 last week. He's from Oberhof. 2 races being held on his home track this year. As Summer mentioned earlier during run number 1, 6 of the 10 races this year in Germany, as the FIL is trying to keep the semblance of a bubble going. This race in Latvia, the only flight the athletes are taking all season. The European ones, at least.
The European ones, yes.
Yeah.
He had a pretty good run here. It was a lot smoother at the top of the track compared to the first one, and there were no glaring mistakes coming down. But like you said, there are not a lot of races outside of Germany, so I don't know how much experience he has on this track, and I think that shows a little bit of why he's sitting up coming out of this exit of 14. That's a great exit, but I just want to see a little bit more of a commitment, but that comes with time and experience, and it's easy for athletes to have that on their home tracks where most of our races are, but it's not as easy for the rest of the world, and he's having a little dose of that here in Sigulda.
Yeah, and to play off of that a little bit more, Maciej Sokovic is up next for Poland. They also train with the Germans, but Coach Norbert Lock of the German team does like to pick one track each year that's not a German track to spend some time on. They've come to Lake Placid in the past, they've been in Lillehammer, and they've been here in Sigulda. So, you know, when you got the money and you have the backing, that's a nice luxury to have, to spend some preseason training time on a different track.
It really is, and especially, I mean, like I said in the first run, Sigulda is typically open to that. They invite a lot of countries to come and get track time, and Poland is one of the countries that gets a lot of time. A lot of the smaller countries that don't have a home track come to Sigulda to train a little bit long on the end of 12 there, but he had a nice correction going into 13. But it caught up with him a little bit on the end of 14, but beautiful corrections from Sokolowitz right now.
For what it's worth, the humidity has dropped a bit from the first run where it was over 80%. Now it's in the mid-70s. As Sokovic comes through with the second place time for the run, second overall as well, 0.12 of a second behind the leader, Moritz Bowman.
There's that extra height on the end of 11 and pushes him a little bit late into 12. A late entrance into 12 is okay. That's actually one of the, it's tough to see on this angle, but you feel like you get inverted on when you're sliding on that, because the point of that curve is really to get up and get down, and the quickest way to do that is to have a pretty sharp angle, and it's a fun feeling as an athlete on the sled. It's almost like when you go on a roller coaster and you just kind of get that little moment of inversion as you're going through a corkscrew.
16th season on the World Cup for this man, Josef Nenes of Slovakia. His best year ever was 2017-2018, where he finished 14th in the overall. And Emily, on this track in Sigulda in the World Cup finale that year, right before the Olympics, he earned his first and only World Cup podium.
That was a really cool race to witness. And we've typically, in a normal season, this season everyone is very separate, but in a normal season, as much as we're competitors, we are friends, and we do like to socialize with each other. And everyone has seen Nenes over the years work and compete, so it was really great to see how many people supported him and cheered him on and kind of shared in that victory with him.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And we saw it coming. He had a couple of good results the week before on Lillehammer. As he crosses into the lead, he found time down at the bottom, 137.175 for Josef Nenes, and that time at the bottom may have been from his advantage from the first heat. So you mentioned you are friends and you like to spend time together. Back in the early days, before there was a team relay, if you raced on Saturday, your weekend was done after that race. And of course, there would be more racing Sunday, but if you were done, there was generally a pretty good party on Saturday night.
Right now we have a little bit more racing to do,
right.
So there's not as much partying, but we still like to, just have conversations with each other, and it's pretty special to be able to connect with people from different cultures with this common sport between us, and it's an interesting bond that we have created.
Kevin Fishneller now up for Italy. A little bit of a disappointing 19th place finish in run number 1 for the Italian, who is ranked 7th right now in the World Cup with 1 podium, 3 top 5s.
Right, he's off to a better start in this run, and he looks really relaxed on the sled, really like he really pushed back. A small skid on the top curve, but it was better than his first run. A little bit of extra pressure over to 12, but he handles it very well. And then decent exit of 14. Kevin is typically one of my favorite sliders to watch on the sled, and he's doing a nice job in this run. It's a little bit off, but he just looks so fluid on the sled, and that's what I love to see. There's kind of that element that is difficult to pinpoint sometimes when you're watching sliders. Right there, he was a little long on 14 and it slapped off, but look how he stretches back and really melts into the sled.
And makes it look relaxed, which is incredible when you're going 75.6 miles per hour.
That's what we do, ideally.
Well, the spectators can show up and watch Luge if they stay far away, like in the woods off into the distance. On the right there, Martins Rebenis, an Olympic medalist for Latvia. Rebenis took bronze at the 2006 Winter Olympic Games, much to the dismay of American Tony Benshoff, who finished just behind him in 4th. And now here's a young Latvian for whom big things are expected in the years to come. Jins Bergens, the Youth Olympic gold medalist from last season. There's Sigulda Bergens, also part of this Latvian team. There's a sled builder named Bergens. There's a skeleton athlete, I believe, named Bergens. And that simply, Emily, as Arturs was telling me, is because it's the most common last name in this country.
Yes, and his first run, he had a big mistake at the start. He was only 200ths faster on this start than the last one. I would have hoped to see more of a difference there. He just looks off through that labyrinth piece. It's a little bit out of control, but he's still within the range of kind of safety lines. So maybe that out of control element is just that he's so comfortable on this track and he's trying to let the sled go and build as much momentum as possible.
And he has found the green down at the bottom in the last few curves. 48.295, a decent run for the young Latvian who takes over. That time would have had him in the top 10 in run number 1.
Right. It would have been a 9th place, so that's for his age and his level of experience, that is very promising. But I wonder, kind of, this was from the outside looking in, it looked like a very sloppy run, but sometimes, like I said, that's really just trying to get as much momentum out of the sled as possible. We don't have anything propelling us down, so we're really just working with physics. And I know on my home track, I tend to do that as well, where I know what I can get away with a little bit more, so I'm more comfortable being offline. And he built a lot of speed. I wonder how much of that was on purpose.
Anton Dukasch is 25 years old from the Ukraine.
Track is clear for Anton Dukasch.
Finished 22nd last year at the World Championship in Sochi, Russia. Among his hobbies, Anton says, it is cybersecurity. He could probably make a pretty good living in this day and age in cybersecurity with attacks happening every week or two.
Definitely seems like the future.
Yep. 4 paddles, not a lot of differential. I've been seeing, Emily, a lot of between 4 and 6, as opposed to some tracks where it can be anywhere from 3 to 10, for example.
Right, and the nice thing about his paddles is how stable his upper body looked throughout all of them. He wasn't wasting a lot of energy throughout that, so they were 4 solid paddles to get him off to the start. It was a little slower than his first run, but very comparable.
It's still the fourth fastest of the 13 that have come down so far. Wow, you just tear off some of these corners here in Sigulda, right?
You do, and that extra pressure off of 14 sent him right into the wall, and again off of 15. He had a good run up until then, but it caught up with him. Like you said, they just tear right one curve into the next. So if you're not set up well in the transition from 10 to 11, that's when you typically see it catch up with you out of 14, if you make it that far.
Disappointing second run for Anton Dukasch. This is out of 14. Looked good at the start.
It did, but that little bit of slap off on the end, he wasn't completely comfortable with it, and he could have stretched back. That was definitely savable, but it's also very easy to have it compound the way it did.
That exit of 14 that we just saw, it actually reminds me a little bit of the exit of Kreisel in Calgary. It's got that same profile, and sometimes
I can see that.
You can come off of it and you think everything's great, and a half second later you've steered into the wall. Now Andre Manzi, back-to-back Ukrainians. As I mentioned during run number one, very excited for later today, the doubles competition, aside from the great Germans and Austrians in the sport. You've got a Latvian team making their World Cup debut, including a 16-year-old. You don't see that a lot on the World Cup Senior Tour.
You don't, and it's a challenge. I was 16 in my first World Cup, and there's a steep learning curve going from, at that point you're still a youth slider. So we have a few levels in our sport. We have youth, junior, and senior, or general class, and this is the senior general class. And the jump from a youth slider to a general class slider is significant. So, but I always like to say, age does not limit you. It's really just whatever you're capable of doing and however far you want to push it. So it's great to me to see younger athletes on this tour.
As Manzi comes in with a second place time behind Kevin Fishneller of Italy, just playing off of that, Emily, and we'll discuss it throughout the weekend, but this is also in part with this young Latvian doubles team coming up later today, because there is no junior World Cup circuit this season.
Right, and that is a challenging spot for a lot of these programs to be in, that if you do not have a home track to have your junior team slide on, where do they go right now? I mean, where do they go during a pandemic where you're not supposed to go anywhere? So
right.
If you're able to come onto the World Cup, I think it is like you said, how many athletes they've tested negative time and time again. They're doing a good job of keeping this a COVID safe and responsible kind of environment. So it's nice to see juniors getting a piece of that.
Very unfortunate first run for Team Austria, who has been about as deep as anyone in men's luge over the past couple of years. Two Austrians were disqualified for heated runners. Nico Gleicher is back in, 15th place, and he's a top 6 athlete this year out of the seeded group.
It is. It's unfortunate. I mean, there's so much. That has nothing to do with the athletes to be disqualified for overheated runners. That's usually on the coaching staff. Especially right now, you're so separated from everything. You don't see your sled until right before you do your controls. So it's unfortunate. I wonder if there are fewer officials. There are fewer unofficial temp checks at the start. So I understand how this could happen, but it's very frustrating for the Austrian team.
136.443, a much better run number 2. Far from perfect, at least aesthetically.
Right.
But a good result.
Here coming out of 14. You see how he's a little crooked on the sled there? That doesn't help with the little bit of extra pressure, but he did a nice job of straightening out just after the exit and really pushing back on the sled. Once again, he has that little fog spot on his face shield. I wonder, maybe that doesn't impact his sight if it's low enough.
People have gotten to know a little better in this pandemic period, that especially people who wear glasses or sunglasses and their masks now get a sense of what losers experience all of the time, trying to keep that face shield clear. Now, Johnny Gustafsson, 23 years old, from New York State in the USA, finished second last year in what they call the Under 23 World Championships, a race within the race, which, if nothing else, shows future promise among some of the athletes.
Definitely. Johnny works incredibly hard. You see how upright he is on his paddles, but how stable and strong those paddles are. He's a great athlete, and it's nice to see how relaxed he's looked on the sled so far this year.
First of three from the USA to compete today in men's singles. The Canadians, who raced last week for the first time this season, did not come to Latvia, but will rejoin the tour next week in Germany.
He had a late entrance to curve 11 there, and it's catching up with him a little bit, but he can fix it here into the 13-14, but there's going to be a little bit of extra pressure. Nice exit from Johnny, though.
Still doubling that disadvantage from 1/10 to 2/10 with a tap of the wall before the finish. Kreisel back in third place right now, dropping a couple of positions for Johnny Gustafsson, who last week had the opportunity, a rare opportunity, to race in the team relay for Team USA, as Tucker West did not qualify for the main race.
Right, but it was well earned, and you can see how he's earning that with that position on the sled out of 14. I mean, he got behind a little bit earlier on the track, starting with, I would say, with curve 11, and when you're behind here, everything happens so much quicker. So to come back from that and have that exit from Johnny, it just is a testament of what a good driver he is.
Nico Gleicher maintains the lead for Austria. Here's the next of the Latvians, Riks Rositas. He's 24 years old. He's from here in Sigulda, and he holds about a 0.05 of a second advantage over Gleicher.
69 start. He's going to need to be better than that to really break into the next tier of athletes. Riks is one of those sleds that you watch and sometimes you don't understand how he is as fast as he is, but here he is.
He learned
a way to improve on that is the start, though.
He learned about the sport from Arturs Darznieks, his teammate from here in Sigulda, who has the third place position after run number 1. He'll be the final Latvian coming up in a moment. One quick foot tap down.
A lot of athletes are getting that little bit of extra push to that right wall coming out of 15.
For Nico Gleicher, he has moved from 15th into now 13th, the top 13. With a little help, he could sneak into the top 10, which would be a great way to finish the day, if nothing else.
Right, out of 14, you see he almost overcorrected coming out. With a simple push back of your shoulder is a big change. It can be a big change of direction for us on your sled, depending on how sensitive you have the steering set up. So he came out and stretched back a little too much and almost sent himself into the right wall with such a good exit out of 14.
Next of the Americans getting ready to grab the handles at the top. This 25-year-old Tucker West is a 9-time U.S. indoor start champion. Brand new facility in Lake Placid, New York for the United States team. Indoor start facility.
Right, we put a lot of time in that facility this summer, and that's been huge. The biggest upgrade for us is that the ramps are long enough so that we can practice our settle, and that's something that Tucker has struggled with in the past. So to have that extra training with the process of how we settle and go from the start position into laying down on the sled, it's really great to have that training tool.
Tucker very fast with his start times generally. He's also very fast with his reaction times, which has really played nicely for Team USA in relay competitions over the years.
He's unbelievable with his reaction time.
Right there, he puts in the second fastest start time as he tries to chase down the Austrian Nico Gleicher. He's already in the red.
Ooh, a big kind of bump onto curve 6 there, and that sets him behind for the rest of that flat labyrinth section. It's a big speed scrub. The thing I love about watching Tucker is after he does make a mistake, you see how he buries his head, and I saw that kind of in 10-11 there. So he really knows that he needs to make up for something, but it catches up with him on that light point in between 15 and Kreisel.
Unfortunate as he drops back 2 positions. Gleicher continues to lead the way for Austria as Tucker West has a time about 1/4 of a second behind.
That's that entrance into curve 6 there that was really rough, and it just took away the rest of his momentum for the flat section of the track.
I believe it is, yes, it's definitely still enough to qualify Tucker for tomorrow's relay ahead of Johnny Gustafson. The USA uses a single heat best time formula, but we'll check that out afterwards as we get ready for Chris Mazder. And no Americans in their debut last week cracked the top 10. And Mazder sits in 11th place right now, so he'll need a solid run and perhaps a little help from one of the other athletes to get into the top 10.
Didn't I get 10th last week?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was referring strictly to the men's competition.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you did get 10th.
Yes.
And the relay team did. Got in the top 10
right,
as well.
and Chris will be in the team relay, just in a different discipline. We definitely need him in the doubles. So this is his only singles, his last singles run on this track for this weekend. He's looking good. He had a very nice run in the first one, very late into curve 12. That's okay though, as long as you manage it well enough, which he did.
He found some good speed, went from red to green at the bottom of the track during the first run, but he's quite a bit far back here at 1600s. Dropping 3 positions. It's a nice little run for Nico Gleicher right now. To be fair, the split times are very tight, but no one's been able to better him.
Right, I would have liked to see the time be a little closer than that with the run that Chris had. I mean, look at him on the sled, he stretched back, he had a beautiful exit there. A little bit of a too sharp of a peak in 15 caused him to go over to that right wall, but so many athletes have been doing that I wouldn't have expected the gap to be as large as it was.
It's kind of hard. Good luck, everybody.
Well, we didn't time it well in the first run, but Chris always has something to say to the camera. Einars Fogialis, long time involved in the sport of Latvian luge and Latvian sport, international sport, is now the new president of the International Luge Federation. As Max Langenhahn of Germany is next to go. This is the top 10 after run number 1. Langenhahn, the winner of the only World Cup race this season, not won by Felix Lock. This is a guy, Emily, that needs to wear sunscreen. I've never seen a fairer skinned athlete in the sport.
Right. It's a totally fine in a winter sport though, so
that's right.
He's in the clear there. But I will say everyone's start times have been about 2 to 300 slower than the first, so that leads me to question if the ice is a little bit slower than it was in the first run.
Well, advantage Nico Gleicher if it is, because no one really has been able to come close here. We saw this in Altenburg. It was crazy. You know, we see it once or twice a year where the track slows down considerably, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. We don't know yet if that's going to be the case here.
Right, but that was a very good run from Langenhahn. Really, it's very promising for this young German. Look how beautiful that exit out of 14 is and how flat he is on the sled. He's just trying to be as aerodynamic as possible, just cutting through the air for all those thousandths of a second.
Well, the next to come down, who is an Austrian, Jonas Mueller, is the first since his teammate Gleicher came down that has better than a 10th to work with. So this will start to give us our advantage, I suppose, because if Jonas can have a clean run and still falls farther behind, then we start to talk about the ice, right?
Right.
Mueller is 23 years old. His hometown is Bludenz, Austria, where they've just completed the newest luge track in the world, which will host the Junior World Championship next year.
That's a shorter track.
That's right. Short track,
than what we
900
need,
maybe? 900 meters.
Right, so that means that the start will be very important, and the Austrians have a strong start program. They have the start coach, Mandy, back with them now, so they really have been putting a lot of effort into that, and it's showing they have such a strong program through and through. A lot of sideways pressure coming off of 11, and a big loop into 13.
Oh.
And he's over.
2 Austrians have turned the sled over today. A third was disqualified. I don't believe Jonas is going to get a finish time here. So, wow, 60%. 60% of the Austrians do not get World Cup points. Close to a disastrous weekend for them, and really not a disaster when you continue. None of the 3 were hurt. So, just unfortunate.
Right. That just shows how quickly things can compound. This is curve 13. There's a lot of height on the end, and it just slaps you over to 14, and he had nowhere to go except over off the exit there. The nice thing about crashing on this track is that with the straightaways, you don't get thrown around as much, so you just have to ride it out, but it's never a comfortable thing to crash, especially in a World Cup race and European Championships.
1 Austrian crashes, another continues to have the lead, and 1 more still to come for Coach Rennie Friedel's team. And what will go down as a somewhat forgettable day on this Luge World Cup season for Austrian men's luge. But Gleicher has moved from 15th place all the way into the top 9 with more to come. Our next competitor, the first of 2 consecutive Russians and 3 of the next 4 from Russia. Gorbachev getting ready at the top. He takes in a 1300th of a second advantage over Gleicher. And again, they will check, make sure everything's okay, that the ice is okay. I sometimes wonder, Emily, they don't do that if someone has a bad skid but doesn't crash. And often the course could get eaten up just as much then.
It could, and usually there are people checking. It can happen quickly. I just think that extra precautions are taken when there is a crash, just because the chance of something being lost in the track is so much higher. But you're right, the track is it's ice, and we're riding down with steel, so it's very easy for things to get cut up.
And speaking of ice, Gorbachev has been what you athletes referred to as iced at the top.
Right, you see him blowing on his hands there, trying to stay warm. It's a mental challenge to stay prepared for as long as he's been out on the ice.
8th place after run number 1, 26 years old, from the large Russian city of St. Petersburg. 6th place finisher last year at the World Championships on his home track. 4 strong paddles and a pretty smooth settle for the first of 3 Russians coming up in the next few moments.
Another thing to think about is he was iced alone. Typically you would have a coach at the start with you for a World Cup, but because of the COVID protocols, all athletes are going to the start alone without anyone there.
Right, and sometimes a coach that has your jacket with you, right? That can put it right over you.
Or to make the call of, okay, do we get off the ice or stay on? Because you never know how long it's going to be. He's having a great run so far. A little long on 14, but a beautiful transition into 15.
Speed is great, by far the fastest, 76.6 miles per hour, and a huge advantage. It was a nice run for Nico Gleicher. Can't take anything away from him. He'll end up in the top 10 after being in 15th place for the first heat, but it's Alexander Gorbachev, as I mentioned, the first of 3 solid Russians to come here.
Right, a nice run. It looked like he almost started sitting up before the finish line, so I wonder if there's even more time in that run that he started to slow down before his time was clocked. Olympic medals have been lost because of that mistake.
That's right. To the musical stylings of the song Hit the Road Jack, here's Semen Palachenko. He's been known to wink at the camera, this close-up shot, before starting his competitive run. Always entertaining. Not only a world champion, but this event is the European Championships, and Palachenko has 4 European titles over the last 6 years, so he's owned this event.
There's no question that when Semen is on, he is a force to be reckoned with. He had a lot of mistakes in the first run, a lot of big mistakes, and is still this far up in the leaders box. So I can't imagine how fast he would have been without those mistakes.
That's right. Coming hard off of that corner, but opening up a 13/100ths of a second lead, and the same problem. He may have the lead down here at the bottom, but how much more would it have been?
I don't know. And it's been, I mean, the mistakes last week and this week were very similar in that of when you come off of a curve, he had strong direction towards the wall. So a lot of that is sled setup, depending on how much you're trying to push it. Every time you push it with your sled setup, you give up a little bit. It's a give and take, and he may be giving a little bit too much.
Right, because he's locked into this track about as well as any athlete in the sport, generally.
Right. And he was in a great spot right just before the exit. So that was an extreme change of direction that shouldn't have happened.
Palachenko done for the day. One more Russian still to come, but not before this man, the 2017 world champion Wolfgang Kindl, 32-year-old, 3-time Olympian. His younger sister Renata competed briefly in the sport of luge, but stopped after a bad crash on her home track in Eagles.
I didn't know that.
Did you know?
It's definitely a challenge.
Did you know that that Kindl won the 2008 Junior World Championships over a field that included Felix Lock?
I did, in Lake Placid, here in the town that I am currently in.
Right.
And Wolfie, in his first run, he had a 21st place start time and worked his way up to 6th place. So he's a little behind there in the section and very early to curve 13. There's going to be a lot of extra driving to come back from that, which he did, but that's just taking from that time. And
that's normally vintage Kindl with the slow start times, the fast bottom times, but he's not going to catch the Russian here.
No, he had too many mistakes in that run. He had a lot of critical driving saves, but all of that work is taking away from the speed that he needed.
Emily, as we count them down with the final 5, all separated by about 1/10 of a second, do you even have the ability to place a number on how much time Palachenko lost with those mistakes? Because, you know, I wonder if it was his race to lose, perhaps, and he did. He looked so good, he was so fast.
He did, and because it doesn't make sense. I mean, the fact that he was as fast as he was with those mistakes is abnormal, so it's hard for me to assign a value to how much that mistake was.
Roman Repelov, 0.07 of a second up on his teammate Palachenko. Together, they have won the last 4 World Cup overall titles, one or the other. And Repelov has a world championship as well.
Right. So Roman had a skid in his first run right there, and it was much smaller in this run. So he does have time in the bank, but he's already moved into the red.
But Palachenko's problems were down below. Let's see what Rapilov can do out of 13-14.
Having a beautiful run so far. And a nice exit out of 14.
Losing time nonetheless, though. 1300s will be a lot to make up here at the bottom. One Russian chasing down another Russian and dropping 2 spots. Amazing. Palachenko. He
amazing,
hits
confusing,
everything.
Confounding. It's so many words, because with the run that Roman just had, you would have, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, that was much better of a run than Semin, and Semin's mistake was huge, yet he was still so fast. That's why it truly makes no sense
And
how
Palachenko,
fast Palachenko was.
yeah, now he's just 2 spots away from a podium. So we get ready for Dominic Fishneller of Italy, who was in 4th after the first run. And Emily, he has 6 career World Cup victories. He doesn't have the most wins over the last 3 seasons, but I would venture to guess that Dominic might have the most podiums of any athlete in men's luge over the past 3 years. That's how consistent he's been.
Right, that would be an interesting statistic. He's just a solid slider and athlete. He works really hard on his start, which has been a little bit slower than he would like to see this week. But overall, like you said, he's consistent. He shows up on race day, and it's nice to watch.
Including the opening weekend where he suffered an attack of appendicitis just 5 days before the race, and then had a top 5 finish. Actually, a podium finish in that race.
Podium, right.
Yeah.
He showed up late to the World Cup week because he was being treated for appendicitis. A little bit of an extra direction coming off of 14 there, and that's why he moved into the red. But once again, the mistake that Palachenko had should have been much greater than that.
Well, as usual, vintage Fishneller, he finds all sorts of time down at the bottom. And red turns to green as he is 1 spot away from yet another podium. It would be his 4th of the year. And Emily, I gotta believe that Arturs Darznieks is feeling quite a bit of pressure. He is in unknown territory right now up at the top.
I would say so, yes. One, you're at your home track. You really want to, well, maybe this COVID situation is going to help that, because your friends and family are not at the track, so you know they're watching, but at least they're not trackside knowing that you want to perform for them. But
a little conflict.
Man, that is a tough spot.
A little conflict for you, because the man at the top, very popular athlete. Everyone would love to see Arturs earn his first podium, but the man with the lead down at the bottom, perhaps your favorite person in the world. So
I would say so.
Good luck calling this one.
No, I mean, at the end, this is sport, and we love to see a good race. So this is great. I'm very excited for this matchup we have here. The pressure's on Arturs. We'll see if he can handle that.
If it's any consolation, because of the pandemic, friends and family are not trackside to cheer him on, for better or for worse, with that pressure. Can Darznieks win his first ever World Cup podium? Anything in the top 5 will be a career best. And he's still in the green. Now to the red.
I heard a pretty good skid going in there. That's not going to be good going into this flat section, but a lot of sleds have been doing that, so he's back into the green already. Arturs knows this track better than almost anyone. A lot of the times he's stayed back from the World Cup tour and had extra training here, so he really has so much experience on this track. He's having a great run, a nice exit into Kreisel there. Oh,
wow,
and he loses it just at the
back.
end.
So Fishneller, another week, another podium, and heartbreak perhaps for Arturs Darznieks. So close to his first ever podium, and it looked for a long time, Emily, as if he'd have it, especially with this beautiful exit.
Wow, yes, it's not over. He's still in a good spot. He still might make that podium, especially he's only 200ths behind
That's right.
Dominic, who's guaranteed a podium, but still, I mean, archers should be very happy with that performance. He did what he needed to do. He held his own. The chips fell how they did, but it's not over yet. He should still hold out hope.
He has guaranteed his best ever finish as Armin Ziegler, a 6-time Olympic medalist, watches on for the final two, both Olympic medalists in their own right. Here is Johannes Ludwig, 34 years old, policeman from Oberhof, Germany, grabbing the handles. He's one of the fastest starters in this sport.
He is, and he had the fastest start in the first run with a 56, so we'll see what we'll compare on this one. But truly, anything can happen, especially on this track today. So we've seen it in a lot of runs. So archers, there's still hope, but man, this is a good race. It's a good end to the men's race.
Joe Ludwig picks up about 700ths on Fishneller just up here in the first few curves, and now he's opening that up to 15.
He's having a really nice, smooth labyrinth there. It's so flat that there's so much time you can build in that section of the track.
Only a mistake will cost him at this point, as his sled seems to be set up perfectly. A little tough there on the exit of 14.
A little bit, but that's a pretty nominal mistake compared to a lot of things we've seen today. I expect him to hold on to that lead.
So it's Germany remaining undefeated this season in men's luge competition, as Lock still to come, but Ludwig has sealed up the victory for the nation at least. Wow, he's fine wine, right? Better with age?
I would say so, yes. And it's really nice to see. I mean, you have to be creative as how you train when you age in this sport, and we saw that with Johannes. He's always, early on in his career, he had such a strong start and then bled time down the track. And I think as he's grown older, he's adjusted training. He's still one of the best starters in the world, which is phenomenal, and he's found out a way to train that can be more conducive to how he's sliding. So he's able to find that fluidity down the track a little bit better, and you've seen so much more success.
Now it's the Bavarian Bullet, my creation, that nickname. Felix Lock, 6 out of 7 races this year. He's stood on top of the podium. 45 times he's been the winner of a World Cup race in his career, second only to Armin Ziegler. And now on course with about a 400th of a second advantage over Ludwig at the start, and that's what he's maintaining here in the early going.
A little bit of a skid again on that upper curve that is so challenging.
The one race he did not win, he finished 5th, and that was in the sprint competition in Winterberg.
Beautiful curve, 11, 12 there, and he's moved back into the green.
Well, he is looking just solid down here at the bottom. He was in the red for a moment, staying off the walls though, and it appears it'll be another win, Emily.
It will be.
Fastest run
Wow.
of both heats. You know, Summer Pritchard was talking about earlier, when a German wins, we call it domination, but this is domination. The European champion, Felix Lock.
Right, I mean, and it was you see how comfortable he looks on the sled if they show a replay at all. But the amount of confidence and that you have to have, that comes from comfort, and comfort with your equipment and with all of your training and everything. So right now he's the full package when it comes to a competitor.
The head coach of this German team is his father, Norbert Lock. Well, Norbert has to take care of the athletes from all of the region. Felix operates sort of as his own little one-man team with his personal coach of no small note, George Hackel. And they've got it all together this year.
This is that you'll really see how comfortable he is right with that exit. I mean, look how stretched back it's a blind exit. And the nice thing about this track is you can't see here, but there is a row of lights going down on the roof, so you can tell you have a little bit of spatial awareness of where you are. So if you find yourself up off of that, you can truly push back and go for it.
Felix Lock becomes a 46er. This is career victory number 46 for him. A little later on in the doubles competition, his Bavarian teammates Wendel and Arlt will be looking to join the other German, Zegert Beneken, also with 46 career World Cup victories. It's been a popular number as of late. Results coming up in a moment to be followed by World Cup standings, all of which are Lock dominated, or as I said several weeks ago, Lock already has a lock on the World Cup title. It's a great look at this venue here, Emily.
It is. You can see how high up that start is for the men, where they enter into the track.
Ludwig second, Fishneller third. Those are the top three in the World Cup standings entering the competition, so the rich get richer. Congratulations to Arturs Darznieks with his career best finish, just off of the podium by 0.03 of a second. For the Americans, Tucker West, the fastest finisher of the two heats, just ahead of Chris Masder and Johnny Gustafsson, all in the top 15. A few surprises near the back of the pack, including two Germans just making the 19th and 20th positions. Only 28 of the 32